Good morning. I'm Bob Wolf, and I'll be your liturgist this morning. And, I think I've been doing something in United Methodist churches for over 70 years, but I don't think I ever had to handle anything in Revelations before. And I'm so thankful. We have a great pastor who talked to us about it last Sunday, especially. It made me feel a lot better by what goes along with the New Testament reading, like Revelations. And of course, that's God, the Holy Spirit, and Jesus. They are so important. So let's get on with the reading here this morning. We're taking this from Revelation chapter 7. Revelation. Now the seven angels who had the seven trumpets made ready to blow them. The first angel blew his trumpet, and there came hail and fire mixed with blood, and they were hurled to the earth. And a third of the earth was burned up, and a third of the trees were burned up, and all green grass was burned up. The second angel blew his trumpet, and something like a great mountain burning with fire was thrown into the sea. A third of the sea became blood, a third of the living creatures in the sea died, and a third of the ships were destroyed. The third angel blew his trumpet, and a great star fell from the heaven, blazing like a torch, and it fell on a third of the rivers and on the springs of water. The fourth angel blew his trumpet, and a third of the sun was struck, and a third of the moon, and a third of the stars, so that a third of their light was darkened. Then I looked, and I heard an eagle crying with a loud voice as it flew in the mid-heaven. Woe, woe, woe to the inhabitants of the earth, at the blast of the other trumpets that the three angels are about to blow. And a fifth angel blew his trumpet, and a sixth angel blew his trumpet. And I heard a voice from the horns of the golden altar before God, saying to the sixth angel who had the trumpet, release the four angels who are bound at the great river Euphrates. The number of the troops of cavalry was 200 million. I heard their number. And this was how I saw the horses in my vision. The riders wore breastplates the color of fire, and of sapphire, and of sulfur. The heads of the horses were like lions' heads, and fire and smoke and sulfur came out of their mouths. This is the word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God.
There we go. All right. It's another good one from Revelation. All the reasons why we don't touch this book, all the reasons why we just leave it at the end. We could read anything between Genesis and Jude. Just leave Revelation aside. This is why I get it. And remember, it is meant to be good news for all people, but not in the snapshot. You have to pan out. You have to look at the big picture, which means we got to pace ourselves because you don't condense 22 chapters into one sermon. So we just sort of have to take what we get as we get it. And what I'm hearing from folks is that you're enjoying it. Because we're finally able to deal with it. We don't have to let it be this scary creature in the closet, but when we bring it into the light, then we can have understanding, and then we can make claim on it, and then maybe we can refute some people who like to delve into the crazy and say, no, it's not that, or at least know for our own selves, no, it's not that. I'm not going to win the argument, but I know that we're not taking that literally, and we can deal with this book. So, last week we were in chapter 6 and 7. This week we're in 8 and 9. It is a continuation of the story. Last week we heard about the 7 seals. Christ came and broke 6 of those 7 seals, and then there was that pause where God comes in to intervene on behalf of the 144,000. And here we are now with the 7th seal. And I will say that I picked the verses that Bob read a couple months ago. Chapter 8 all the way through 9:21, and I didn't think you really wanted to sit and listen to 50 verses of scripture. So I picked a little bit, and then when I started digging into the passage, I went, oh, but they need these, and they need these. So I'm going to summarize those ones that we missed, which includes the first 5 or 6 verses, where it says, we see the 7 angels, and we see the 7 trumpets after the seal is opened, and then there was 30 minutes of silence. I don't know anywhere else in the scripture that there's 30 minutes of silence, just sort of underscored. There it is. As with most things in Revelation, there's all kinds of conjecture about why the 30 minutes of silence, what it means, what to do with it. We're going to take 2 of those. The first one is dramatic effect. You've got all this destruction, all this upheaval, all this undoing, and then there's just a pause for all the rest of the destruction that we read in these next 2 chapters. The other is this, and I like it even more, that it is a stillness and preparation for the prayers that are offered. So in this passage, before we sort of deal with all the trumpets and the alarm and the crazy, we have the prayers that are offered. This is a stillness in preparation for the prayers of the faithful that are offered. William Barclay, who's one of my favorite commentators for this particular book, says this. He says, even the music of heaven and even the thunder of revelation are stilled so that God's ear may catch the whispered prayer of the humblest of God's trusting people. I love that. I love that in the chaos and even in the worship, we got all that happening all at the same time in Revelation, that there is this pause to hear the whispered prayers of God's people. And then after the pause, it says another angel, in addition to the 7, another angel with a gold censer came out and stood at the altar. The gold censer is the thing that holds the incense for worship. You don't generally see them in a Methodist church. You might in a Catholic church or Orthodox or Episcopalian, and they often bring it in sort of waving like this to get a little blow of air, and then it makes the incense fill the room. It becomes a very sensory experience to be in worship. That's all they're talking about, a gold censer that has the incense, but it says a great quantity of incense. You are smelling up the place there as they go into worship. And the smoke of the incense goes with the prayers of the saints, and they rise before God from the hand of the angel. And so as I was studying that, I learned a bit, which is that the custom of sacrifice also includes the custom of the incense. And the ways that it was explained was that in the sort of ancient temple, where there were animal sacrifices within the Jewish tradition, that was a pretty normative piece, and it's called the blood altar, because it's built so that the blood will drain off when you sacrifice the animal. Before that, before you get to that, in the place of worship, is the altar of incense. And you burn the incense before and after the sacrifice is offered, and it's considered to be like an envelope that carries the offering to God. That's in earthly worship. We're talking about heavenly worship here in Revelation. And in heavenly worship, there are no animal sacrifices. And so the sacrifice of praise is the prayers. So the prayers are the primary sacrifice, the primary offering. And the incense is used as sort of this conveyor belt of sorts. It's the vessel that takes those prayers up to heaven. So it's this beautiful sort of visual of worship. Right? There's the sacrifice of prayer, and there's the incense that carry them both to God's ears. So this powerful, sensory-rich worship experience is happening, and then bam, verse 5 says this, then the angel takes the censer and fills it with fire from the altar and throws it on the earth, and there were peals of thunder, rumblings, flashes of lightning, and an earthquake. Things went south very fast. We hear the thunder, we see the lightning, we hear about the earthquake. We feel that it's sort of all happening all at once. And if we hearken back to chapter 6 and 7, we'll remember that all of that storming is a sign to pay attention. Something's going to happen. So we've got this act of worship, and now we've got this flag that says, pay attention, something is about to happen, and that something involves the 7 angels and the 7 trumpets. The trumpets begin to sound, and with each trumpet we see some eerie and frightening things. This is not literal, but it's also not euphemism. This is tough stuff in these chapters. With the first trumpet, we have a hail, and we have fire, and we have blood from the sky. And the dry land and the grass and the trees are burned up, but only a third of them. It's not complete destruction. It's only partial destruction. That's good news. In apocalyptic literature and within the book of Revelation, that's good news. The second trumpet brings a burning mountain, and it's hurled into the sea, and with it, a third of the water turns to blood, a third of the sea creatures die, and a third of the ships turn to wreckage. The third trumpet sends a blazing meteor to the fresh water of the earth, turns it into wormwood. That makes it bitter. That means people can't drink it, and that causes death. The fourth trumpet turns against the sky. It takes a third of the sun, a third of the moon, and a third of the stars. It darkens both the night sky and the day sky. The destruction here is happening to creation. The last 2 chapters, it was people killing people destroying cities, people suffering, people hungry because of the famine. And now this is earth, all of creation suffering in some form or fashion. And it's awful. It's uncomfortable for us. And as awful and uncomfortable as it is for us, for folks that were in those times, early church hearing Revelation, it was not new. Biblical literature, apocalyptic literature, these perspectives had these things happening. Blood and storms and death, all of that was normal within the apocalypse as they understood it. And we hear echoes of other scriptures. We go back to the Exodus, to the story of the Israelite people with the Egyptians, right? The people were free. The Israelite people were free in Egypt until they got the new Pharaoh, and the new Pharaoh was a jerk. And so now they're enslaved people, and enslaved long enough, and they say, God help us, and God sends who? Moses. We got this one. Y'all just shake it out. We're all right. Revelation makes us a little bit tense. God sends Moses to go talk to Pharaoh. Pharaoh has a hard heart. He doesn't listen. And so then God sends what? The plagues. And we've got frogs, and we've got death, and we've got blood from heaven, and the Nile turns to blood, right? All these things that are they're scary and awful and part of the Exodus story. They're not new now in Revelation. And when you're in a place like Exodus and you're talking about the Israelite people who are being abused and oppressed by Pharaoh and the Egyptians, and God comes in to intervene, it is good news. It's not good news for the Egyptians. That's a whole hermeneutical study all of its own. But speaking as the Israelite people who have been suffering under Pharaoh, to see God step in and bring some justice is good news. So then when we go back over to Revelation and we hear about the Israelite people, these people and Christian people who are suffering under an oppressive empire, and God comes in and shows up in a mighty way, they're not so mad about it. Like, good job, God, showing up on our behalf. And we're like, Jesus says, turn the other cheek. And we're like, and they should get theirs because they're mean and awful, right? We're sort of torn between those things. Are we supposed to be compassionate, or are we supposed to want justice? It's all right to be sort of rung in the middle there. All right, so we've had all these trumpets and all of this craziness, and then there's an interruption, and in the interruption, we see an eagle coming and crying out, woe to you. This is a common biblical rebuke. We hear it in both the Old and New Testament. We hear it from Jesus himself in the Sermon on the Mount when he's there and he's teaching about the Beatitudes. He's next to the Sea of Galilee. One of the things that we hear him say regularly is, woe to you. It's kind of like, shame on you. You're getting it wrong. There's a rebuke there. There's a thing that says you're not all right. You're sinning, and this is a problem. You need to stop being unjust and abusive and hard-hearted, and you need to turn back to God. Now, all of this, commentators will warn us, do not take literally. People love to take the book of Revelation literally, to just take those words and then sort of use them as this fiery weapon, but it is not meant literally. And if we step back, we go, of course it's not, because we see eagles all the time on the Wenatchee River and on the Columbia River, and how many of us have ever heard them speak English and tell us anything. Not a soul. And if you did, let's have a conversation. We'll talk about where therapy might be a good place. The point of the eagle is to say that God will use nature to speak and send a message to us. Not literally speaking, but God uses messengers. And if people fall off the map, guess what? God will use the animals. And if the animals fall off the map, the scriptures tell us the rocks will cry out. God will use whatever means necessary to get through to us. And so the fact that God is also sending an eagle should not be surprising at all. Then we get to the fifth trumpet and it blows, and it is worse yet. And I told you, I picked the verses a couple months ago and I was looking at it and I was like, I just left ... for whatever the fifth trumpet brought. It's a mess. The fifth trumpet blows, and then a fire comes from heaven and it goes to the abyss, which Barclay says is the intermediate place of punishment. It's not purgatory, because purgatory is for humans. It's its own thing. The intermediate place of punishment for the fallen angels, the demons, the beasts, the false prophets, and Satan. It's not hell either. It's like a holding place for all those fun folks, the fallen angels, the demons, the beasts, the false prophets. So the star falls from heaven. It opens the abyss. These folks are now open for business. And the scene gets markedly worse. Barclay says it this way. He says, the picture of terror mounts in its awful intensity, and now the terrors coming upon the earth are beyond nature. They're demonic. The abyss is being opened, and superhuman terrors are being dispatched upon the world. He is also clear, this is not literal. This trumpet and the resulting terror simply represents the powers of evil being given one last chance before the end. But before the end, things are going to be awful. And the scene that we are offered is one where locusts are descending upon the earth. Now, locusts are considered among the worst pests that the world has ever seen, any time, any place, any era. They're described as coming in droves. They're like crickets or grasshoppers, but a little bit bigger. Coming in droves that can travel in a column 100 feet deep. That's from me to the back doors right there. A column 100 feet deep and 4 miles long. Up to the bridge. All locusts. It said that when they come, they like darken the sky. These are literal creatures. This part, the reality of locusts is true. And there are accounts of locusts in different eras, different centuries, as late as the 1860s coming into Africa. And what they do is they obliterate all of the shrubs, all the greens, all the produce, everything that's growing. They just eat it. They strip the bark off. It is unusable. It's inedible at that point. And the one account from the 1860s is that they came in and they ate everything down to the nub. There was nothing for the people to eat, and they died. 200,000 people in the resulting days. This is before semi-trucks and trains and things getting everything there. So, just like that, the locusts have this kind of destructive power. And then with that destructive power, here's the part of the abyss being open. These are not normal locusts coming to eat the grass and the trees. These locusts are heading for the people. Right? This is like a Hollywood flick all of a sudden. Now the locusts are coming after the people. And it's pretty terrible. And the only good news in there, at least for the people that are receiving this revelation first, is that the locusts are coming for the people who do not bear the mark of the Lord on their forehead. Meaning, those sinners are going to get it. Which, if you're in the good club, is good news. But if you're like, I'm not sure where I am in that's kind of a sketchy deal. It's kind of a problem. And again, remember, when you're the one who's being abused and harmed and pushed down, something that pushes against your abuser becomes good news. So we sort of get it. We don't have to like it, but we get it. All right, now we get to the sixth trumpet. And with the sixth trumpet, we see an awesome scene of 4 angels and a cavalry of 200 million. Sounds kind of good. We like the cavalry. Except that the horse heads resemble lions, and they breathe smoke and fire, and their tails are like snakes with heads. 200 million of them. Commentators don't really even want to take a shot at it. That's what Barclay says. He's like, people don't even want it. They don't know. They're not going to make it up neither. They don't know. But we're just going to put that one on the shelf for now. I'm not going to, take any stabs at it. I'm not anywhere close to Barclay. And if he's not going to say anything, I'm not going to say anything. All right, so this is the part where it's all doom and gloom, and you see this revelation, you see the angels, you see the forces of the cavalry coming at you with these horses that have the heads of lions. It's the time when you cut to a commercial break till you can know the rest of the story and what's coming next. Which is kind of good news, because if you're following the awfulness, it's really big, it's terrible, it's overwhelming. And so we want that pressure release, we want that pause. And with the pause, we might be tempted to just shelf Revelation. We're not coming back. There's a whole lot of books in the Bible, Debbie. We should read one of those. I get it, but we are coming back. We made the commitment. I made the commitment anyway. And enough of you have said you're having fun with it, that we're just there for it. But I want us to remember this. This is 4 chapters out of more than 20 in the book of Revelation. It's a snippet. It's a chunk. Now, it feels like a heavy, weighty chunk, and that it is, especially when you're in it for a couple weeks on a row. But I want us to think about sort of the arc of somebody's life. We're going to go with a novagenarian. So somebody in their 90s. How many years breaks into how many months, how many weeks, how many days, how many moments, how many hardships, how many trials, how many hard things. And if you're in a hard thing, talking about the hard thing, it feels really impossible and heavy, lonely and isolating. Maybe if they're telling you about the hard thing that they went through even decades ago, if they get into too much detail, you're like, I'm out. Right? It's too much. It's too heavy. We want to shift to our platitudes and go, oh, it's going to get better. It's going to be okay. But I want us to sort of think about that snippet that is so dark and heavy and powerful. But within the larger arc of life, it's just a small space. Now, that small space may be 6 months, it might be 18 months, it might be a month. We don't know that definition, but it's just a small space. And so I want us to sort of have that mindfulness when we're looking at Revelation. This part is heavy and hard and dark and awful, but it comes in the context of a larger whole. A larger whole that is meant to be good news for all people. Don't let go of that. It is meant to be good news for all people. And so when we're in a part that is particularly trying, remember, there's more to the story than just this. And the larger part of the story is that it is good news for all people. So we're going to hold out for the good news, because I would hate to get this far into Revelation and be like, oh, no, we're going to skip to something happier. Because in Revelation is something happier. Something in Revelation is more promising, and we have to get there, but we can't speed it through it. We got to see the things, because otherwise they continue to be these looming monsters that we're afraid of. Unless we put the light on them, unless we take them on, they will continue to be too powerful in our lives, in the scriptures, and with other people. And so to be able to reclaim this passage and this whole book, we have to be able to spend some time with it. So we're going back, but the reminder today is there's hope on the other side. There's good news still yet for us, which is a good reminder for us, because some of us are in burdened times. Some of us are in the pain and suffering of a season, and we need to remember there is hope on the other side of this. So let us cling to that promise, not avoid the pain, but remember there is more to the story.